even if $10,000 is just for show and to create a little media attention, it's still $10,000. When dealing with politicians and how they generally operate, and the fact that just about anything a politician does to some extent is for their own self-interest, for their own benefit. I mean, they're politicians, so if they go out there and they help someone, the helping of this person is to some extent towards their benefit. They're aiming to get you on their side. They want you to support them whenever they're trying to get that election going or whenever they're trying to get your vote. But there are obviously some politicians who seem like they specifically target a certain type of vote. Duke pledges $10,000 monthly to help Hungary, challenges PM President to do the same. Public Services Association President and leader of Tobago's Progressive Democratic Patriots, Watson Duke, says he will donate $10,000 from his monthly income to the needy in light of rising hunger across Trinidad and Tobago. In a virtual address on Monday, Duke called on the country's leaders and everyone else earning over $20,000 to do the same. And just to make it known, this one gentleman, Mr. Duke, is earning much more than just $20,000. So if you're earning $21,000, maybe you shouldn't necessarily look to give away $10,000. But the gesture that Mr. Duke here is putting forward is a worthwhile one. There are people starving, there are people struggling, and yes, it could probably be said that a lot of this has to do with publicity, and you may be wondering how much of it is him actually caring about people. But does that really matter in this case, in the situation of someone struggling in poverty? If he is doing this and his intention is some political mileage, and what he is doing to get this political mileage is actually helping you, then you may not be too concerned about the political mileage. Then in that light, it may be best if all our politicians were looking for that type of political mileage. Mr. Duke went on to say, I have said that I cannot eat a plate of food and my neighbor has none. I cannot sit down around juice, all kind of salad, all kind of meat, and they have people who don't have rice to cook, who don't have peas to cook, who have nothing, and the government is happy. Duke said he had documents purportedly showing that from March last year to now, the Prime Minister and the President each collected almost $1 million in taxpayers' money, while the opposition leader, he said, has collected more, $1.4 million, because she collects a pension from being Prime Minister. And that's a good point. The amount, that's something to always keep in mind. When you hear some of these politicians and they speak to the country and they speak about everyone paying their due and putting up their sacrifice, bear in mind that they're being paid to do what they do. So on the politician side, it makes sense that if you are attempting to be a successful politician, you always bear that in mind, that these citizens, these people here, are the people who are paying you your salary, and they are being paid very well to do what they are doing. So it's a job you are doing, and basically the citizens are like your boss. You are trying to please these citizens. You are trying to do best by these citizens. And there's a certain type of politician, there's a certain type of public figure that is making the rounds in our modern political sphere, in the modern world, and that specific type of politician, that specific type of public figure is gaining traction because many people are noticing that these people that we are hiring, these people that we are paying $1 million over the course of a year to make decisions for us, when they're making these decisions, we aren't the people that are at the top of their minds when they're thinking about who benefits from these decisions. So the common man is seeking a different type of politician. And this specific gentleman Labour leader from Tobago has an angle where he shows precisely the picture of this type of politician that is catching traction in these days. The type of politician is called a populist. Populist and populism refer to movements, political movements, where politicians attempt to appeal to the ordinary man. They are attempting to reach out to the ordinary man. They are working on behalf of the regular hard-working, the regular small man, the man that the usual politician bypasses. And you can see how that could become a very tempting offer, because there are lots of people who feel like the regular politicians, and the regular politicians eventually, because how it generally works in politics is, if you enter politics now, the chances that you leave within the next decade are slim. Most people that enter politics, it seems like they're aiming to remain there until they are very old and very grey, and there's nothing they can do with their lives anymore. So politics has a much longer career time span than the average job. So generally a politician, by the time they're in positions of power, they would have been in and around the workings and the schemes of politics for years. And that being in and around this working gives a slant that allows many people in a society to believe that the political class treats themselves as elites. They believe they're a little above the rest. And it's an understandable belief. If we're going back to one of the modern restarts of populism and the populist movements, it would have started, for example, with Obama in the United States, where he was one of the most well put together presidents you'd ever meet. But when there was the 2008 crash and the banks did all their crooked jobs and they basically crashed the economy, costing a lot of people, costing a lot of ordinary people, costing the small man, what was done by the government is they paid to bail out the banks, and then the banks proceeded to give the higher ups bonuses out of the payouts that the government gave. Bear in mind, the governments don't actually produce this money. The money that a government used would be money and authority to use this money given by the citizens, given by these ordinary people. So the ordinary people would be seeing this well put together people, these group of well put together people that we thought were running this system so perfectly. They're backstabbing us. So what we're going to look for is we're going to look for a ruffian, someone who could get in there and change everything. We don't care how this person looks. In fact, the more rough around the edges this person is, the more believable their character is, because we're looking for someone to take a sledgehammer to the establishment and to the elites. And over here in Trinidad, we have our own battle with some of these characters. Now, don't get me wrong, when I say battle, it's not necessarily that I'm saying that populism is a bad thing, because populism has different incarnations. So for example, if you know about the differences between left and right in terms of politics, in Trinidad, unfortunately, and in most of the Caribbean, really and truly, we don't deal much in left and right politics. It's a matter of just party politics. We just go on tribal partisan politics. But if you're dealing in left and right politics, there are populists on the left and there are populists on the right. There are people that could have other groups of beliefs. There are people that could have other ideologies, other political ideologies that center around finding solutions for what is considered the ordinary man. But what exactly does make someone appealing to the ordinary man? And obviously when I'm saying man here, I'm talking in the unisex term, but something about populism does have a masculine edge to it. A lot of what appeals to the ordinary man has that flair, has that machismo, that charisma, that edge of being cavalier and brave and on the brink of reckless. So for example, when Duke went to the First Citizen Bank and extracted several $1 million in cash and walked across with that in a bag from one bank across the town, to several people, they may have been watching that, and that would have been off-putting to them. They're watching, and this man cannot run a country. We do not want such a person to lead us. But to other people, they're watching, and yes, that's exactly the man we want, because that's the brave attitude we need. If someone is to take on the elite ruling class, they must be someone that is brave enough to do something that may be considered reckless as trying to swim from Tobago to Trinidad.
Mr. Duke and Mr. Augustine would dive into the water 10 minutes before 9. 40 minutes later, the minority leader would attempt to board a canoe, which capsized. He would then take a tour on a jet ski before eventually boarding a pirogue after 10 a.m.
Most people thought that was pointless and it didn't do much to help the cause, but it did some to help his cause, because apparently even since then, with each grand, seemingly crazy or far out there gesture or theatrical display, his political stock keeps rising. And that's one of the problems also. With populists, it seems like many of their opponents don't even know, they don't quite understand how to tackle them. Because what you may think is their weakness may actually be their strength. what people look at and are attracted to by them, you may be thinking and highlighting this, hoping that it repulses people, but it doesn't. If you're hearing some background noise, that's because it's raining and you're hearing it. It's not soundproof where I am. Maybe if you like, comment, share, and subscribe, you may like and comment me into a better studio where it would be soundproof. Who knows? We'll see where it all goes. But if you're looking for if you're trying to channel masculinity and courage and bravery and strength, then what better place to go look for that than in the protective services, than in the military? And then, is it any real surprise then our Commissioner of Police, who comes out from the military establishment, seems to be well fitted into a populist mold? Now, don't get me wrong, I have an affinity for populists. I happen to like them. So if by chance the commissioner does see this, I happen to like populists, because I think the general idea of populism is it's going back to the root idea of democracy. We're trying to appeal to what the majority of people want. And it seems to stray away from the idea that seems to be coming more and more in modern times, that the government and the rulers rule as they know best and as they see fit because they know best. But that's not true. Even if the leadership knows best sometimes, they cannot know best all the time. So I understand and I can relate with populism and I can like it to some extent, but there are takeaways from it. If you are of the belief that you are fighting against the establishment, then you'd kind of always be on the offensive. You're always looking to see who is attacking you so you can counter-attack them. And then it's no surprise then when we see, for example, it seems like our commissioner is like Beetlejuice. Anyone that says his name 3 times, he pops up and appears in front of them. And that doesn't work well for our country and for the running of our country. Back in February of this year, cops warned producer after post on Barrett, "Don't aggravate Commissioner of Police." A man who was interviewed by police at his home for hours after he engaged in a social media tit-for-tat with Police Commissioner Gary Griffith has been warned not to aggravate the top cop, as this could prove to be problematic. And many people have found that out firsthand. It seems like the commissioner prowls the internet, and those who have negative views on him or negative views on the police service as a whole, he makes it his duty to correct them, and correct them with as much snack and sprinkles of attitude as he can muster. Hopefully this may not get such a response because my channel may not be that big yet, but even still, it's not necessarily a criticism on the man himself, because as I said, I understand the idea behind populism, but the sensitivity that seems to go along with such a mentality, and it's understandable, as I said, if you think you're fighting against the system, then there is some sensitivity. But even if you're doing a good job, and even if you are obeying the mandate of the And even if you are obeying the mandate of the ordinary man, of the normal person, of the man on the street, that's who you're working for. How you treat with the criticisms that would be levied your way would tell a lot about how you're going to govern and how you're going to lead in whatever position of authority you have. Now, there's a legitimate side to the feeling of victimization that someone who attempts to go along populist lines would have, because if you're going along populist lines, you're not with the establishment, you're not with the general group. So for instance, most media, or as is popularly called these days, most of the mainstream media would be well within the lines of the establishment, because media houses have been running for years. And if a media house has been running for years, line in line with the political establishment, they would have ordinary ways how they are accustomed doing things. And most media houses would not be happy if you are attempting to come in and revolutionize this. So nearly every single populist that exists everywhere in the world doesn't have too much of a favorable relationship with the media. That may actually be a symptom of populism. If someone has an especially bad relationship with the media, chances are they may be a populist. And that symptom is also seen very clearly in the cases that we watch here locally. And it's unfortunate really that a lot of the talk and a lot of the discussion that is brought up around the jobs that are being done and the people in such positions, for example, our commissioner, a lot of what is brought up, a lot of the discussion has little to do with how effective his actual job is, with how he is actually running the police service, because as far as I can see, at least it doesn't seem any worse than we have seen other commissioners do. So most of the discussions around him have to do with how he responds to the criticisms, how he responds to questions, how he responds often becomes the main point of the story and not whatever was the underlying case. And I think that maybe if someone in his camp could stop and take a look at that, maybe somehow they could get him to dial back some of the responses. Everything doesn't require a clap back and a response. To leave off the commission and hope that what I said doesn't warrant me a warrant and a visit or a response from him. To return to one of the main problems with populism at the end of the day. When all things are considered, one of the main problems with populism and the populist candidates is that at the end of the day, there's still politicians. Duke's promise of 10,000 wasn't his first attempt at outreach. This is not the first major act of philanthropy undertaken by Duke, who last year set out on a mission to complete all unfinished houses in Tobago. In the lead up to the general elections on August 10th, Duke embarked on a roof repair drive, starting with 14 homes in his constituency of Roxborough, Delaford. The program went on to assist up to 40 families from both Tobago East and West. During a political meeting, Duke said the project is in keeping with the PDP's mandate to ensure there are no unfinished houses in Tobago within its first 5 years on the political landscape. The project, which employed the lend-hand system, used manual labor provided by residents in the community. But here's the kicker. While many political opponents have taken the PDP political leader to task for failing to continue the initiative after losing his bid to become the parliamentary representative for Tobago East, Duke has on several occasions openly referred to the many hardware owners he still owes on the island. Yes, populists are still politicians, as can be told by the people who still have unfinished houses in Tobago, as can be told by the constituents who had a farm started up for them sometime during last election by two politicians who were seeking to be members of parliament for the opposition party. They started a farm and they had intention of carrying this on for the people to make sure everyone has a meal to eat. It was started in La Hakita, and I don't think one seed was stuck in the ground after the elections came and passed. And that's just the problem. Many populists who seem to be aiming at the ordinary man, that's just the problem. They only seem to be aiming at the ordinary man. So tell me, what do you think? Do you think that populism has a place in our society? And possibly as we move forward, you'd like to see some characters more in line with keeping with what the ordinary man has in mind for our country? Or do you think that the populists are very dangerous and ruling by majority is basically mob rule? And it's very scary when a mob determines what goes in a country. Which side do you think you'd lean on? Don't forget to like the video if you like it. Comment and tell me what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.
When you wake up in the morning and you hear the birds cry, and you feel the music rising with the tide.